All right, let's jump right into this explainer. When you think of artificial intelligence, what usually pops into your head? Probably just endless rows of servers, cold hard math, and thousands of lines of code, right? But what if I told you that AI is actually more like a mirror? It's not just some purely technological tool, it's a profound reflection of the cultural values, histories, and philosophies of the very people who build it. So today, we're exploring the cultural DNA of AI. Okay, let's dive into this global tour. We'll start off in Japan with techno-animism and symbiosis. Then we'll look at the diverging paths of the US and the EU. After that, we'll examine China's collectivism and central control, followed by Vietnam's focus on sovereign AI and protection. Finally, we'll wrap up with how all of this is shaping our global AI future. First things first, we've got to shatter a pretty massive myth, the idea of neutral tech. Technology, and especially something as wildly adaptable as AI, is absolutely not culturally neutral. It doesn't just exist in some sterile vacuum. Every single algorithm written, every data privacy law passed, and every safety protocol designed carries the very specific worldview of its developers and lawmakers. So, what exactly do we mean by cultural DNA? Well, it's the foundational values, those deeply ingrained traditional thought patterns, and the living standards of a society. These aren't just abstract ideas. They fundamentally dictate how a country goes about building, integrating, and regulating artificial intelligence. By understanding a nation's cultural DNA, we can actually map their ancient philosophies directly onto their most cutting-edge AI policies. It's fascinating. Section 1. Japan, Techno-Animism, and Symbiosis. Over here, the approach to AI isn't driven by some sci-fi fear of a machine uprising, but rather a deep-rooted desire for harmony. To truly grasp Japan's AI landscape, you have to understand the concept of techno-animism. It's essentially an extension of traditional Shinto beliefs, this idea that absolutely everything, animate or inanimate, has a spirit or a soul. Artists like Emi Kusano explore this so beautifully, pointing out how the Japanese concept of seimeikan, which translates to the feeling of life, invites humans to actually care for technology. While Western media often loves to portray robots as these laser-wielding existential threats, Japanese pop culture, think Astro Boy or Doraemon, usually depicts robots as friends and companions. It's all about treating the tech as a vessel that we live right alongside. And this brilliantly illustrates just how deep this cultural difference goes. Check out this 2025 Pew Research data. 85% of Japanese respondents said they were totally comfortable with robot caregivers for their elderly relatives. But over in the United States, only 28%. That is not just a minor statistical difference, it's a completely different social contract. Driven by severe demographic pressures, like a rapidly aging population, and a strong cultural emphasis on wa, or harmony, Japan views automation as an absolute necessity for keeping society running, not as a looming threat. And you know what? This cultural acceptance maps perfectly onto their legal framework. Japan's AI Promotion Act, which was enacted in May 2025, is primarily a non-binding framework. Instead of slapping heavy restrictions on developers out of fear, it leans into strategic coordination, sets transparency goals, and actively promotes R&D in critical areas like healthcare and robotics. It's a super cooperative, non-punitive approach that exactly mirrors their symbiotic cultural view of humans and machines working together. Section 2. The West. Diverging paths of the US and EU. Let's see what happens when we leave the harmony of Japan and head westward. We see a really sharp divergence here. The United States is all in on market-led development. The core belief driving things there is that whoever builds the biggest, most dominant AI ecosystem is ultimately going to be the one setting global standards. They utilize what you could call a messy rule of law, leaning heavily on sector-specific guidance, like NIST's AI risk management framework, rather than trying to pass broad, sweeping federal bans. Now, flip over to the European Union, and they take a completely different rights-based approach. Driven by a constitutional prioritization of human dignity, they focus heavily on ethics by design. Through massive frameworks like the GDPR and the new EU AI Act, Europe is aiming for preemptive horizontal regulation to protect people's fundamental rights long before the tech even reaches the public. Germany is a fantastic example of this European model in action. They're actively leveraging their legendary engineering culture to establish this brand of AI made in Germany. The whole philosophy is rooted incredibly deeply in human dignity and autonomy. They prioritize ethics by, in, and for design, setting up trustworthy AI certification and dedicated quality testing centers, all under the incredibly strict oversight of a data ethics commission. Their main goal? Ensuring AI is transparent and functions exactly as intended, strictly within their societal norms. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it highlights a massive modern challenge: healthcare AI. To train high-quality AI, you need massive, comprehensive datasets. But Germany simply refuses to compromise on its strict GDPR-era privacy values. So they're actively funding projects that pool medical data across hospitals, but they're doing it only in ways that strictly conform to data protection rules and constitutional non-discrimination protections. It's pretty incredible. They're proving that a society really can innovate on the bleeding edge of tech while still fiercely protecting an individual's right to control their own personal data. Section 3. China, collectivism, and central control. Let's travel east again to see a completely different regulatory approach. Over in China, AI governance is heavily influenced by Confucian values, which place a huge emphasis on unity and the interdependence between an individual and society as a whole. In this specific model, social stability and public welfare are paramount, period. When individual privacy ends up conflicting with collective security or the broader public interest, the collective welfare is always going to take precedence. This results in a highly centralized form of algorithmic governance, overseen by regulatory bodies like the Cyberspace Administration of China. They ensure that AI is kept as a tightly controlled, highly deliberate tool for national modernization. And the state absolutely backs up this philosophy with immense structural power. The Chinese government is mobilizing staggering amounts of human, material, and financial resources to make sure that AI progress aligns perfectly with national interests. By directing massive funding towards things like smart cities, intelligent manufacturing, and robust healthcare infrastructure, China has rapidly shifted from being a tech follower to a global frontrunner. And they're doing all of this while maintaining rigorous standards to guarantee the technology serves their ultimate vision of collective societal harmony. Section 4. Vietnam. Sovereign AI, and protection. This is a truly unique position. 120 billion. That is a truly massive number. It represents the number of parameters in Vietnam's Vietnamese large language model. But why does this actually matter? Because Vietnam views relying entirely on foreign, Western-biased AI models as a direct threat of cultural assimilation. This 120 billion parameter model is quite literally a digital shield. It's custom-built to process the specific nuances of the Vietnamese language and reflect Vietnamese culture entirely independently of outside influence. So, the crucial point here is that Vietnam is treating AI as core national infrastructure. We're talking exactly the same level of importance as their electricity grids or the internet itself. Their national AI strategy has this ambitious goal to place them in the top 4 of the ASEAN region by 2030. They are already drafting their first comprehensive AI law, focusing on risk-based, human-centric development. But above all else, their primary focus is squarely on domestic AI autonomy. They are actively trying to encode their historical values and their unique cultural soul directly into their algorithms to fiercely protect their digital sovereignty. And you can see this formalized right in their official government strategy, Decision 127. They are systematically pushing to open up datasets across domestic industries and build up these regionally prestigious AI brands. By creating this really tight collaborative ecosystem between the state and local tech enterprises, Vietnam is making sure that their rapid integration of AI leads to sustainable economic growth without sacrificing their distinct cultural identity in the process. Section 5. Shaping the global AI future. When we zoom out, it's pretty clear what's happening. Let's move to and see how this builds into a cohesive picture. When you map all these regions side by side, we get this really fascinating global matrix. Look at how perfectly the core values align with the regulatory approaches. Japan's techno-animism naturally leads to non-binding cooperative R&D. The USA's obsession with markets creates these sector-specific decentralized rules. The EU's focus on fundamental human dignity results in preemptive horizontal risk frameworks. China's pursuit of collective harmony brings about centralized, state-directed algorithms. And Vietnam's intense drive for sovereignty creates protective domestic infrastructure. The takeaway here, there is no single correct model. These are all completely valid reflections of what different societies fundamentally prioritize. As one of our sources perfectly captures regarding the future of human-robot integration, the gaps between vision and reality, laboratory and living room, expo pavilion, and everyday life are real and significant. Yet the attempt itself matters. It's a great reminder. While our global policies might differ wildly, the global attempt to actually weave our deeply held human values into artificial intelligence is a profound shared human endeavor. Which leaves us with a pretty massive question to ponder. As artificial intelligence inevitably crosses our physical and digital borders, as these completely distinct regulatory and cultural models start colliding on the world stage, whose cultural DNA is ultimately going to shape our shared global future? Are we heading for a clash of algorithms? Or could we see a beautiful synthesis of human values? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.